Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Shauna Redding. I am Director of Content Marketing here at RKD Group, and I'm so excited that you all are here with us for this webinar, and so grateful that you all are taking time out of your day to be here with us. Before we start, I want to go over a couple of housekeeping notes. First of all, this is pre-recorded, but we want to know what you're thinking and what questions you have throughout the webinar. So please feel free to comment at any time and we will get back to you via email. The second thing I want to mention is that we will be sending this recording to you at a later time. So no need to frantically take notes throughout the webinar. You will get the recording. So now that we got those things out of the way, onto the topic at hand here. Thankfully, we are on the other side of this historic government shutdown that affected millions of Americans that depend on SNAP benefits. During that shutdown, a lot of first-time donors showed up, and now food bank leaders like yourself have this incredible opportunity to act on that in order to keep as many of those new donors as possible. So we put together today's session to help you answer one core question that you should have as a food bank leader, which is how do we sustain this support once our moment of an emergency passes? So today you're going to hear from Stephanie Kirk, who is RKD Group's Vice President of Direct Mail Strategy, and Jen Doak Mathewson, who is Director of Digital Strategy here at RKD Group. They both work very closely with our food bank clients, so some of you might know them, to develop their fundraising strategies and tactics. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it along to Stephanie and Jen.
Thanks, Shauna, and welcome everybody. We're glad to have you here. So as Shauna mentioned, food banks across the country saw this large surge. It was real. It did happen for a short period of time, but it did create a meaningful opportunity. Across the surge, we saw that show up in many different ways. Increases in one-time gifts, hundreds of new sustainers, major leaps in reactivation, and higher average gifts due to increased giving of mid-level donors and major donors. We'll kind of talk a bit more about that later, but wanted to kind of recap what we saw. So just as a recap, the U.S. government shut down. It was for a record 43 days. And during that time, we were discussing first, what did that mean for government employees? And then towards the end of October, we started to understand that SNAP benefits would either be partially or fully suspended, affecting millions of Americans. And so those two points together really created this sense of urgency, a moment, millions impacted, and we saw communities rise up to meet that need. It was similar to COVID that we saw large numbers of people come out. We actually did see days that rivaled days during COVID. But we want to be clear because I know that there's been this conversation of COVID 2.0. It isn't COVID 2.0. It's really acting more like an emergency. And we'll talk through that as we walk through the numbers and future planning. And then the last thing wanted to touch on because we don't think this is over. Likely, we're going to see the rise in need again as healthcare becomes more expensive in 2026. I think families are going to having to be choose between food and medicine, healthcare and groceries. So the need will likely rise again, and we want to be prepared for that. So before we jump into what should we do, let's talk about what we saw. Looking at 54 food banks, we wanted to look at revenue and active donors between October 1st and November 19th. That's really what we're considering this emergency timeframe. And during that emergency timeframe, we saw a 41% increase in total revenue for these 54 food banks. This includes general giving, which would be donors giving $1,000 and below, mid-level $1,000 to $10,000, and major $10,000 above. So combining all of those groups, we saw a 41% increase in total giving. And then also important to note, and we saw that with higher average gifts, is that we saw increases in mid-level giving and major giving. So 40% increase in mid-level giving, and those spikes really happened on November 1st and 2nd, when those SNAP benefits were partially or fully suspended. And then we also saw a 38% increase in major donor giving. So really not only an opportunity in our general audience, those giving under $1,000, but opportunities to maintain engagement with donors giving at a much higher level, and really would be an opportunity for us to grow revenue for the organization. And we were able to see the revenue, but we also want to understand who's giving. So emergency moments often activate people, people that weren't currently engaged. And so this surge is no different. We saw large waves of reactivated donors and new donors. And so what did that look like in terms of numbers? We saw a 37% increase in reactivated donors. So those that hadn't given in a year, we saw 37% increase in those donors coming back and being engaged. Why are reactivated donors important? Reactivated donors are important because they, over new donors, have a higher value for your program. And so bringing more of these high value donors back really is an opportunity to maintain that momentum and growth that we're seeing here in this emergency moment. And then we saw a 68% increase in new donors. Wow, that's huge. Food banks, we have been working to build our active donor files after COVID, and we saw the community step up again. Now we know that emergency donors don't retain at the same rates, but we'll talk through what that looks like to maybe even convert 1 or 2% more of them than we had in past emergencies, and what that could do for the program. And then another stat that I thought was really interesting is that emergency donors often respond to emergencies again. So this was an important opportunity to reactivate some COVID donors. And so we saw a 30% increase in reactivated COVID donors. So those donors that had given during that early COVID time, that March through the summer timeframe, they came back on to support during this emergency. I think it'll be important as we look towards integrated strategies for the future, how we can keep those donors activated, because we don't want to, it is hard to bring donors back on, convert, work to pay to convert, and then they lapse again. And so really focusing on how we can engage those donors differently. And then it's important to know when we're looking at an emergency or a crisis giving timeframe, that there really is a clear pattern to how the revenue comes in. So we see that surge. And let me take a step back. So this chart is from another organization experiencing an unexpected an event in 2024. So this organization, it is a food bank. They experienced a natural disaster. And so they really followed that predictable pattern. So you see the surge in the early weeks. That natural disaster happened. We probably saw the first spike is digital revenue. Second spike is likely mail that was hitting in homes during that time frame and revenue coming back. And then we see the plateau. So we still see engagement. It likely is in the news a little bit. We see that plateau, and then we see the decline. And this really is a standard pattern. And we can start to see this for even the government shutdown. Where this is a little bit different with the government shutdown than in some of these natural disasters that happen in different times of the year is that we're actually moving into our biggest fundraising season. And so we're definitely going to see that surge, plateau, decline, but we're going to come back up with a large revenue surge again through year end. And it's a really important time for us to convert donors. I think one thing to keep in mind is that the decline can feel dramatic. And I think there's a tendency to think that the surge is the new baseline for the program. And I think we want to be really clear that don't mistake the surge for a baseline. Really, the surge is going to help you fill gaps, accelerate revenue, but the long-term stability for your program is going to be from maintaining that core program, not really riding the wave of the emergency. And so with that, I think Jen's going to jump into what does that look like to come off of the post-crisis and move towards conversion?
Thanks, Stephanie. So, yes, let's take a moment to reflect on what happened the last time we saw a surge like this. As Stephanie mentioned, there's kind of a typical ebb and flow of these crisis donors. And overall, retention can be really difficult, right? You've got a portion of your one and done donors. You've got your lapsed donors that may have given during COVID, responding to the moment. But overall, that retention was inconsistent over time. Many donors who rush into the emergency disappear just as fast. And so when those organizations wanted to retain those folks and make a second ask, oftentimes they're liable to put them into the regular programming. We're clear that you want to keep the foot on the gas pedal and continue your regular cadence of fundraising. That said, it is necessary for us to recognize that crisis donors aren't going to be typical in terms of behavior, in terms of messaging, as maybe some of your other core donor groups. And so segmenting out crisis donors and making sure they get that specific messaging that refers to their prior activity and their prior call to action is really important. Flexibility and personalization to that end is what is necessary here. So programs that pivoted, paused, were able to steward and thank people for their above and beyond support, saw success and better retention down the line. And so what we see here when we're learning from COVID, when we're learning from weather disasters, when we're learning from other emergencies, is to think faster, personalize more, engage sustainers earlier, and never ever pause that core fundraising program. So let's take a closer look at what stewardship could look like for you all. Now, again, as Stephanie mentioned, we're headed into the best conversion season of the year. And so coming off of the government shutdown, maybe you saw a little dip prior to year end, but we're headed back into year end where we tend to see a majority of revenue come in. These are lessons that can be applied not just to crisis donors, but donors overall when we come into the year end season, especially if those crisis donors made an additional gift as we head into December. Regardless, stewardship needs to start now. Quick, meaningful gratitude is one of the strongest predictors of retention. We see it in the data over and over again. It does not have to be fancy, but a rapid thank you email showing the impact of their gift can go a long way. Here's even what your gift made possible this week. If you have photos, for example, of a food distribution event you were able to do because of this additional support, you can very easily turn that into an email and show them that this is what they helped make possible. Thank you calls are another great approach. We talk a lot about a multi-channel approach. Don't count out the phone when we talk about those channels, even if it's just a small portion of your donors, maybe a new mid-level donor, some new sustainers. A little can go a long way here, and people appreciate a simple thank you. Donor shout outs on social or email. Organic social is another great way to continue that stewardship and make some shout outs. People do like seeing their names recognized, especially if organizations or companies helped pitch in as well. That's a great way to complement these other channels when you're looking to do rapid stewardship that's also sustainable. So I wanted to share a few stewardship examples here from other food banks. It can be a balance to strike between having impact numbers because often you're on the move all the time. You're running those distribution events. You're trying to calculate the numbers, and then also making sure that that stewardship is timely and effective. These organizations were able to toe that line. So, Food Bank for New York City used Gradavid to send out a video from their CEO. This was literally an iPhone video shot from the CEO. It was heartfelt. She's passionate about what she does, and that shone through. It does not have to be a highly produced video in order for it to be meaningful. Food Bank for Central Pennsylvania did something similar on Thankview. You see kind of the email here with the little envelope. That was a video from their vice president of development who was actually walking through one of their warehouses. You could see the boxes of food stacked up. And so donors could see in a really tangible way what the impact of their additional gifts helped bring about. The advantage those tools provide is you can send out mass emails to a large group of people, but also personalize them by first name. So it feels like more of a one-to-one communication. I really like this example from Houston Food Bank because it asked specifically for a second gift and acknowledged the support that donors made during Hunger Action Month. It can feel like appeals come on top of other appeals, but this was truly a crisis moment. And they went out of their way to acknowledge past support for a campaign that just ended. They also offered an opportunity to make a monthly gift in addition to a one-time gift. We'll get into sustainers a little bit later. Lastly, North Texas sent out an email to people who made gifts during the shutdown, as well as to those who made gifts specifically in response to their shutdown appeals, acknowledging that people can come in through multiple channels when responding to crises. They had an included PS about the end of year match going on, but really this message was to show how many additional neighbors they helped serve, as well as additional distribution events. They also had this really powerful quote from someone who said, "I've never visited a food bank before, but I wanted to provide for my kids, so I had to put my pride aside and visit." These are people during this crisis that were truly impacted. It was real. They were missing paychecks. And quotes like that really help bring the donor into the situation at hand. What was kind of interesting about the shutdown, and we see this to some extent with other emergencies as well, is that even though these appeals don't explicitly ask for monthly gifts, people make monthly gifts in response to the crisis. This is a major opportunity, but we have to act intentionally here. People realize that even though that shutdown is over, paychecks that go missing mean that people have to potentially put more money on their credit card or borrow money. And the ripple effects after the shutdown go down well beyond Congress is up and running again. So demand for services will continue to rise as people recover, pay overdue bills, reconcile medical expenses, et cetera. And donors realize that. So in the first 90 days or so, you want to make sure you reinforce the value of the gift, go beyond your standard autoresponder gift receipt, because above and beyond support deserves above and beyond recognition. You also want to share progress on the issue that brought them in. Again, in addition to food distribution events, neighbors served, maybe you can count meals delivered, complement that with stories, making sure that people realize that their gift is hard at work, making a change for their community. We also want to consider, for sustainers in particular, how match or meal offers might look a little different than one-time gifts. So, for example, $1 can equal 6 meals. Well, for a sustaining gift, what can $10 a month do? Is it really 60 meals? Does it allow you to have more of a flexible approach when it comes to future crises? Can you stock up, in advance? Can you plan ahead, right? These are people who are investing in their community through you, and their messaging should align with that.
I think when you're thinking about sustainers, and I was really taken aback by the increases, the unusually high increases in the number of new sustainers during this time. Some markets were seeing hundreds of donors increase in sustainers, and for me, when I'm thinking about mail, it also matters to plan when and how you're going to mail this large group of donors, but also this very loyal group of donors.
Mm-hmm.
How can you tailor your mail to them? Can we have special call outs for them in newsletters? In letters. We don't send newsletters. Could we do it in letters? So I think it's really important to plan how we can make those touches also in our direct mail pieces. I think broadening it out is that beyond sustainers, food banks now have hundreds of more new donors, and we can't ignore them. So we have to figure out how to expand that communication strategy and touch those loyal supporters, but also the more general audience. And as Jen mentioned, we want to keep our foot on the gas. So if you take away one thing from us today in this conversation, is that the organizations that grew the most after emergencies were the ones that never stopped investing, that never stopped creating plans to move forward. So really, what does that look like? So don't pause that spring acquisition. We acquired a lot of donors this fall, but don't pause that spring acquisition. We want to continue the momentum in acquisition and in paid media. We want to continue to meet donors where they are by integrating multiple channels. So we want to make sure that we curate their experience from the email that they get, from what they're seeing in media to what they get in that direct mail package. We want it to be an authentic experience that acknowledges how they interacted with the organization, and then also ask them to stand with us in the future.
Thanks, Stephanie. So here's 3 clear steps you can take this month. Step 1, assess your surge. Who came in? Are these new donors, reactivated donors, sustainers, mid-level? What's the breakdown here? Also take a look at your preferred channels for these new donors. How many responded to an email, a text, came in through media, as an example. Secondly, launch a rapid stewardship plan. Over the next 6 months, aim to connect at least twice with new donors, a thank you and an impact update. Be sure to incorporate the channels that these new donors came in through in order to align with their preferences. So this can be a text, email, videos, top banners, even a postcard with a QR code that links to a video could be really impactful here. Typically, in terms of what we're looking for in stewardship is a thank you within 30 days, a second ask appeal, and then an impact report with a few stats related to that crisis. It doesn't have to be an intense plan, but it does have to be an intentional one. Lastly, stay the course with acquisition and media. Don't let a surge today undermine your pipeline tomorrow. Every ad, every email is a reminder that you're there doing important work, and those reminders add up to being top of mind when the next crisis hits.
Thank you all so much for that, Stephanie and Jen. That was such a valuable and educational conversation. I hope that you all feel the same, and I hope that you all feel more prepared to finish out the year strong. So again, please feel free to reach out to us with any questions and comments. We want to hear what's on your mind. And if you don't reach out, you'll be hearing from us anyway. We're going to be sending you a recording of this webinar. I hope everyone has a great day and a successful year end.